So, hello everyone. Welcome to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast today. We're lucky to have Helen Bailey with us, who's the head of learning from Strategy Solutions. So, Helen, great to have you on board on our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen.
Well, it's one of those ones where we spent some time recently, and it's just a bit of a no-brainer to have you on here. So that's great. So I really appreciate it from today. So in advance, as our listeners would know, that our special guests have 7 questions given to them, so they can prepare and have so we can really glean that rich knowledge from them on the call kind of today. So before we start though, Helen, would you mind sharing your career history with us, kind of where it all started for you? That'd be great.
I love the idea of myself having rich knowledge to bring to the party as well. Can I just
Yeah.
say that? Yeah. So I've always worked in L&D. So I work for Strategy Solutions. We're a business consultancy. We describe ourselves as being like the Avengers, which I think is a great expression. But what it means is we're kind of experts in what we do, and we bring that to help businesses from small all the way to worldwide. And my background is learning development. I've always worked in L&D, apart from a small stint as a checkout manager for Tesco a very long time ago. I like to think it's because that is where my passion lies. I'm really passionate about learning, about how it can be done well. I've had my own business for 14 years. And I've done a lot of interim work. So I've kind of dotted around in a lot of industries. So education, healthcare, distribution. I think it's probably easier to talk about the ones I've not worked in.
Yeah. So, and it's really great to have that breadth, isn't it, of different organizations and understand cultures, and that just kind of brings that together to help people from an L&D point of view, from a learning solutions point of view, doesn't it?
I think so. And as well, I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of interim work. And I think when you do a lot of interim work, you get to do a lot of things that you wouldn't normally get to do, particularly as a learning development person. So during the pandemic, for example, I worked in communications because where I was working, there was no L&D, particularly at the beginning, when we went into that first lockdown. So, I have a bit of a background in communications. I can build SharePoint sites. I can write employee engagement surveys. I think those are things that if I'd have been in a traditional L&D role, I wouldn't have always had the opportunity to do those things. So, yeah, a few strings to my bow.
Yeah, really good, and it's great to have you today. So I really appreciate it. So let's dive into the questions,
Okay.
and let's see how we go from there. So when you were kind of growing up, or in your career, or kind of in your life, who kind of inspired you as an authentic leader, or from that perspective? And are you going to use an Avenger to come in?
I am not going to use an Avenger. You see, the truth is I don't know the Avengers well enough to pick one, if I'm really honest. Yeah. But I'm going to pick 2, if that's okay. And these are probably 2 people never knowingly in the same room. Both from Manchester, or both very strongly associated with Manchester, because that's very close to my heart. So one is Sir Alex Ferguson. It's not a secret to anybody who knows me. I'm a Man United fan. And one of the things for me about Sir Alex, he was definitely ambitious. He was very bold and courageous from the very first. So he kind of said, we want to knock Liverpool off their perch. And I thought that was quite ambitious at a time where the football club was. He was all about evolution, not revolution. So you kind of got this sort of gradual change of the teams as he was going along. And my favourite thing was that the way the team played, and any Man United players, and reflecting on this particularly today after last night, his teams played with a particular amount of flair. So there was a lot of style that went with it, and I really enjoyed that. So if that's one, my other one is Emmeline Pankhurst.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's a pretty diverse range.
Yes.
Yeah, they weren't in the Avengers together, were they? And I think what I admire about Emmeline Pankhurst, many years ago when I was at university, I did my dissertation on women in the 1890s, on the basis that there's a book, it's called The Weaker Vessel by Antonia Fraser, and at the beginning she talks about. She went to a history conference, and she was writing a book. She said, I'm writing a book about women in the 1500s. And the historian said to her, there weren't any women in the 1500s. And actually, there was a ruck of women in the 1500s doing amazing stuff. So I think that kind of led me to Emmeline Pankhurst. But, there's a few things I really love about her that kind of really resonate with me, probably now more in my career. So, the thing about deeds, not words. I'm very much about, and I remember saying to the CEO of strategy when I first started, Wendy, I won't talk to you about what I can do. I'm going to show you what I can do. I'm definitely more about the action. I think also this idea of, let's incite this meeting to rebellion. I mean, that sounds a bit radical, doesn't it? I've got a T-shirt with it on, which I very rarely wear for work. I'll be really honest.
Yeah.
But I think it's the idea of let's be bold, and I think that's kind of a reflection on how I've talked about Sir Alex as well. Let's be bold. If it doesn't work, what do? We can do something else.
Yeah.
So let's be a little bit disruptive. And I think my other thing about Emmeline is I often reflect is how would she feel about where women are now?
Yeah.
All this time later, and yet, I'm working on a lot of things which are about supporting women in the workplace at the moment, and how many women get their ideas appropriated by men, all those kind of things, and I wonder how she would feel about that now. And yet to have that vision that women get the vote, and be able to talk about equal pay and all the rest of it in that moment, and knowing that she probably wouldn't see that out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty brave, isn't it?
Yeah. And to dovetail on the back of that about being brave and bold, from those two people you've mentioned, was a real characteristic in their trait, wasn't it? Of their time. So two different times, but very
absolutely.
brave, very bold. I don't know as much about Emily Pankhurst as you would know, but I know more about Sir Alex Ferguson, and I always remember that he was one game away, I think it was Oxford, from being sacked, and he was really bold about from that point of view. But he had that self-belief, didn't he? And also Emily Pankhurst about the self-belief, even though what was going on at that time about self-belief, we can do this and being proactive. They both got those real traits in Emily.
I think there is something there, about. And I think it's also, if I could give that to everybody, if I could wrap that up in a box and give people confidence or self-belief, and I think, they're very much the same street, then I would. Because it's, we have an expression at strategy, which should be more dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. and it's that kind of, we ask people, and if they say no, we're okay with it.
Yeah.
But quite often people don't do that. And we shouldn't be afraid to say we're really good at something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if we are, we are.
Yeah.
And if we've got the facts to back that up, I'm sure Sir Alex doesn't sit at home and says to his grandchildren, I was a bit of a football manager. I'm pretty sure he doesn't say that. I'm pretty much that I am the most successful British manager ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And although I don't lay claim to that, I don't have, I'm not the best L&D person ever in the world.
Yeah. But I'm sure you will be one day, Helen. I'm sure you will be, with all trophies behind you.
I'm disappointed that you don't think I am now, Stephen, if I'm really honest.
I have to be careful of our audience, Helen. I have no favourites.
Right,
I have to be careful.
Fair enough.
I have to be careful.
I take that.
Yeah. So how would you describe your leadership style? So what would you say is your style in leadership?
Somebody once described me as being like the late Queen Mother. So take that as you will.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of elaborate on that a little bit. So what they meant was that she was sometimes described as being like an iron fist in a velvet glove.
Yeah.
So there was kind of a combination of things. You certainly, the way it was described was you certainly knew that there were things that had to be done, but the way it was done was and described. And I think that's quite important to me. And I think as I've got further on in my career, I think inclusion's become really important to me.
Yeah.
Particularly the fuzzy edges of inclusion, which I think we're going to come on to with it shortly. And I think for me, I'm really interested in what other people think. And because of that, I'm more interested in the conversation about how we do things.
Yeah.
I've got ideas and sometimes I've got too many ideas. I'm quite happy to say, we could do that. It'll be amazing. And somebody needs to say, actually, Helen, you need to kind of walk it back a bit. So I think that's, for me, I'm really interested in that. I'm okay with people being different. I'm okay with people who have different approaches because I'm a bit weird and wonderful.
Yeah.
So I think, people being themselves. I think I'm also quite curious in terms of I ask a lot of questions. I really need to understand things. I understand that can be a little bit annoying as well because I keep going, so why are we doing that? What's that? What's all that about? And I think, and this probably goes back to the choice of the people who inspired me, but there is almost a go big or go home attitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's be brilliant. Why not?
And that would echo with me because I've got this bit of it's probably a bit spiritual, but I believe we were on this planet once.
Mm,
We may as well enjoy it and go for it and give it with best
absolutely.
gusto and see what happens, rather than get to kind of towards the end of our lives and go, oh, I wish I'd done that, and I wish I'd done this, and I could have done that. And so in my life, I want to have no regrets.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. And I've never had anyone describe as the Queen Mother before, so you're definitely first there, Helen, on that position. But it's really, if you kind of go firm but fair, but from that perspective. And I also like the bit about being curious, because as I've got older, I'm more and more curious, and I want to learn, and I want to hear from people, and people's views may not be. And you and I've had conversations before, but we may not agree, but we can agree to
Mm,
differ, and that's really great. That's a great place to
absolutely.
be.
I think so. And I think, I think a lot about learning because I do think I spend a lot of time investing in my own personal development because I think it's really important for what I do. Because I
Yeah,
think it's really important that when I'm stood up in a room or I'm sat doing a session virtually, that I can bring the latest thinking into
yeah,
it. It's not just about, this week I was running an aspirational women program and I was talking about an article I just read in the Harvard Business Review. And I just think, that role models that for
yeah,
everyone else. But I think it also makes what you're talking about, it makes it fresh.
yes,
Because, I think I have to be enthusiastic, so everybody else is.
yeah. And I think that bit there about so like keeping it fresh, I say the word keeping it current, so then
Hmm.
people can relate that actually you as a learning professional wants to keep getting better, keep developing, etc. And also just to share, which is one of the great things about leadership, sharing visions and stories so people can really relate to, rather than just always theories, if that makes sense.
Or I have a bit of a thing about this. I think I know we've talked about this before, haven't we? That you
Yeah,
and I probably know more full box models than
yeah,
you
yeah,
know we can shake a stick at, and that's great, isn't it? But
yeah,
I'm really interested in what that does. What does that mean practically for people? I really want people to go away with some practical tools that they can actually use.
yeah.
That's what's important to me. So, great, we have situational leadership. Let's use that as an example. Okay, what does that mean for you then? What does your team look like? Are you using the right style? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about those practical things.
Yes.
That makes me
Yeah.
very happy when we do that.
Yeah. And I know you and I got excited before talking about it, about we like people to go away and practice and do things
Yes.
with rather than I've learned a load of theories today and I go, what do I do with it? It's actually right. We can take this. How can you put it into your daily work and come
Mhm.
alive? And I know you and I get a real buzz when they get that light bulb moment. Come on, that gives us a real joy, doesn't it?
I think so. And Erin, who works at Strategies, our head of marketing, she posted something this week actually about a session that we'd run internally, and she kind of said, "Oh, I had a real light bulb moment." And that kind of just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. And I don't
Yeah.
mean that glibly, but genuinely that people have taken that away and they've been able to use it. That's amazing for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, it's good to feel warm inside. I think that's a really nice thing, isn't it? And I think sometimes people, when you're doing a training course, and it can be quite lonely as a trainer or a kind of facilitator, but then when you get that bit of feedback, you go, yeah, it's really worthwhile doing, and I'm so pleased people have enjoyed it and taken a lot from it, isn't it?
I think so. And I think I often say at the end, so I'll be delivering a session and then I'll kind of go upstairs at strategy and they'll say, "How did it go?" And I say, "I don't really know." Because you've been in that space all day. You do get a
Yes,
feel for it, obviously, but I don't think you have any perspective on it
yes,
sometimes because you've been kind of immersed in the whole experience,
yeah,
and sometimes you don't really have that view, and it might not be till a couple of days later, that you kind of think, "Oh, yeah, that was really good. That
yeah.
went down really well," or yeah.
So the next question to go through on our authentic leadership, Helen and I have chatted through before, and I suppose this is probably, I think, a good question to just talk through or to help educate people a bit more. Because if we took over recent years, we've had people being more educated in kind of the mental health arena and well-being, etc. We hear a lot more about kind of menopause. We hear more about inclusivity. We hear more, but in recent terms, and even like with me, when someone said to me about neurodiversity, I was like, oh, what do I do with this now? So I just thought when you and I had a chat through about, I hear people using the word neurodiverse. I'm not sure they know what it means or that. So I thought it would be great today just to get your view on what is neurodiversity.
This has been one of my sort of passions, and we've just been talking about learning. So what happens to me quite often, and just to give it some context, is I'll kind of read something and it will spark my interest, and therefore I will then do a load of more research, and then I have to blog and get it all out of my head. And neurodiversity is one of those. I read a book, which is Neurodiversity at Work, which is by, I'm going to get this wrong, so apologies before we start. It's Amanda Kirby and Theo Smith, I think. But yeah, Neurodiversity at Work. And it just really intrigued me. And particularly in the intention, we have a retention crisis in the UK. 61% of people who are in a job right now will not be in that job next year. And we have a retention crisis. And then we have 30 to 40% of people who are neurodivergent are unemployed. And so it seems to me that there is a whole group of people we could be utilising. And that kind of started me on the path. And I know I'm not answering your question, so I'm going to come to that now. So when we talk about neurodiversity, it is to do with those indicators which are around the brain and things to do with like sociability, learning. And if you're talking about dyspraxia, it's that to do with, our physical function that are outside of what is seen as the societal norm. That's probably the best way to describe it. And we can chat about what's normal anyway. I mean, that's a whole other thing, isn't it? But that's really what neurodiversity is all about. And if we think about that, 1 in 7 people in the UK is neurodiverse. So there is an element where actually, if you go around and look at your teams, there's going to be somebody in there who's neurodiverse who probably hasn't disclosed because they don't feel comfortable to disclose. And I think there's probably a whole thing about the organizational systems and structures that we have in place that doesn't make it easy for people to disclose. And, one of my other favorite stats when I'm talking about inclusion, which I spend a lot of my life talking about inclusion, but is that people find conversations about things that are different hard. And because they're hard, we stay away from it. And just to kind of finish short, really, if we're talking about neurodiversity, that that tends to be around things like autism, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, all those ADHD, and there's loads that I could list, but those are the ones probably we're most familiar with, and how people exhibit those in themselves. And just to think about language as well, neurodiversity tends to apply to a group, neurodivergent tends to apply to an individual. And I think, the other one that we use is neurotypical, which is somebody who is more seen to be in societal norms.
And they're scary facts, aren't they? About nearly a third of, let me get my neurodivergent colleagues.
Neurodiverse, because it's a group.
Neurodiverse group that are not in work or that, and also from a learning aspect, isn't it, as well, that the conventional, and the thing is now, what is normal? I don't know. There is no normal. It's just about actually how do we be inclusive and help people and work together from that aspect. Would that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And I think what the really interesting thing is that if you do things to support people who are neurodiverse, you actually support the workforce as a whole. So why wouldn't you do it? And yet we are so, I don't know. I think organisations, there are some really good organisations, there are some medium, there's some not so great, But it seems that some of the things like interviews, they're really, interviews are fundamentally tend to be the same.
Yeah.
And yet that can be quite challenging for somebody who's neurodiverse. I think one of my stats is 53% of organisations have not adapted their recruitment processes for people who are neurodivergent.
Wow. So, they're already set up to fail, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And if people see that, I think people are very good at getting a handle on what the norm is in the organisation. I think you can certainly see that in an interview. Then that makes people even more unlikely to disclose.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the bit then of conforming or imposter syndrome, that kind of moving into that kind of part of, well, if that's the norm, I won't share kind of what kind of I'm going through, or my learning or my style, etc. And I always remember, which is before kind of neurodiversity words, etc., kind of came to light as in more the forefront. And I always remember a stat that many, many years ago, that the average reading age of an adult in the UK is as equivalent as an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
But most people write documents or processes, procedures, etc., to a high level, which people just don't understand, can't relate to. So it's just about how people are alienated, isn't it?
Yeah, it's about excluding people from an organisation. And I listened to a podcast a few weeks ago, which is the What If podcast from the CIPD, and it was what if everybody brought their authentic selves to work? And there was a really interesting comment in there about just conform enough. And I've been thinking about that quite hard. What does that mean? And how much do I have to conform? As somebody who comes from the weird and wonderful tribe, not from a neurodiversity perspective, I'm just a little bit quirky. Let's go for that.
Yeah.
The word, just do enough to conform. Is that just do enough to get by? And then we start to think about the emotional energy that kind of takes up from people. When we talk about masking and people can't do their best work if they're masking.
Yeah.
Because they don't have enough energy left to do their best work. They can probably do just enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of moving on from that point of, so how would we support, so as a leader, or how could we support kind of colleagues that are neurodiverse? How could we help from that aspect? What could leaders do to make things better, Helen, or support colleagues better?
I have a great slide when I talk about this, and the heading is, a colleague tells you they're neurodivergent. Things to do, things not to do.
Yeah.
So much of it is individual specific. And I think what we do quite often is, oh, that person's got autism, therefore we need to do this, this, and this. And so much of this is about having a conversation with the person, and about the way you have that conversation with the person. So I think let's not stereotype people.
Yes, good.
That's the first thing. Let's have a conversation. And also, if somebody tells you they're neurodivergent, let's thank them for sharing that, because that probably took a lot of courage to come to that conversation with you. Let's ask them about what's the positive aspects of it, and what's a bit more challenging. I think it's important to ask about the positives. There is certainly a lot of research that talks about, people with autism have high attention to detail, for example, and they are being actively recruited by engineering firms and air traffic control, because obviously all those things require a higher level of detail. And I think too often we talk about, oh, the challenges of that, or they need a quiet space, or we can't, we can't have all these group meetings, and we can't do all those lovely icebreakers because people feel uncomfortable with it. Let's talk about all the positive stuff. There's a great argument that people who have diverse colleagues in their team, they get better ideas. So let's talk about the positives. Let's ask them what it means for them. Let's ask them what would help. And let's think about what we can do. And there are loads of things that are really sort of, easy, quick wins that we can do. So, for example, one of the things that really interests me, and we always do it strategy now, is if we're running training sessions, we provide a bit of a quiet space where people can go. So fortunately, strategy, we have quite a big room that we use. So we have like our main sort of area for the learning, and then we'll have a few quiet tables just to the side, so that if people need a space to be away from the group, they can go there.
Yeah.
And they can still be part of it, because I think, those things can be overwhelming. It's things like, we use Menti a lot as strategy. I think it's a great thing for psychological safety anyway, because I think people can just tell you what they feel without having to say, oh, I think this.
Yeah.
But I think also it enables people time to think about their responses. So it doesn't have to be an instant, in that moment. It's things about, giving people boxes to keep their desks tidy. If somebody's got ADHD, for example, being mindful of the fact that their mind is quite busy. So they probably like a few things to be going on at once rather than one project.
Yeah.
But it's all about the conversation for me. Have that conversation, but have it in a really positive and supportive way. And I think that's my other thing I want to give everybody in a box, Stephen. Number one is confidence. Number two is always about, and we've just been talking about this, leaning into those conversations.
Yeah.
Have those conversations. It's not as bad as you think it's going to be, I promise.
Yeah. And I really like the couple of bits there about, first of all, let's not stereotype. There's broad spectrums of, if you took ADHD, dyspraxia, etc. It's not just one size fits all. You go, yeah, you've got ADHD.
Job done.
That fits. This will fit for you and cure you. But it's one of those ones that I kind of learned many times over the years, that even if you don't understand the topic, ask the person, how's it affect them, what's the positives, as you said. And I love that bit there about the positives, because everyone always jumps and thinks, oh no, what have I got to do to accommodate the colleague, rather than actually they've got some wonderful skills that are so enhancing, to go, what's the positives to it. And I think that I'm just a great believer of, if you could create a safe space and you've built up that emotional bank account, I think Stephen Covey about emotional bank account, but actually give that space where you can have a chat and the colleague feels, I can talk about it. I feel that actually it's not going to be held against me, and those kind of things. Then you'll come up with a really good, sensible solution. And sometimes it could be the smallest things that make the biggest difference. But rather than, and I would just say, like today, don't jump in and assume that's what people need. Have a chat, and you'll be amazed actually what people need to function, work well, bring some really good stuff to work. Would that make all sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think, it's the little stuff. There's a lot of research talking about people who were neurodiverse in the pandemic, working from home, felt their working lives improve immeasurably.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it was like, oh, come back to the office. And it was like, oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
That feels very different, because people were able to operate in their own space. They're able to work a bit more flexibly, as they have been doing. I think one of the things about office working is, when I've gone to strategy, it's the first time I've worked in an office probably about for 3 or 4 years, in all honesty, pandemic and jobs that I've had. And it's remembering all those social cues again. Like if I don't just go make a cup of tea for myself, I need to remember to go make a cup of tea. And let's name check them. So Rob, Jane, and Emily, who sit with me on my particular, set of tables. But remembering to do all that stuff as well. That's quite an important thing. And sometimes, for people who are neurodiverse, it's not as easy to pick up on that stuff.
Yes.
Or trying to judge the cues. And I think another thing that we need to do in onboarding somebody who's neurodiverse is, let's be really explicit about, this is where we go for lunch, this is how you get lunch, this is how long you get. All those kind of things, are really important, so that people know the expectation of what's going to happen. Yeah.
And also, I think on that, Helen, that's just good workplace etiquette, isn't it? So anyone onboarding, anyone new, to really say, because I remember I've worked in, and probably only 2 real employed companies in my career, and when I've moved around within those organisations, I felt a different cultural presence when people have really said, Steve, this is where you park the car. This is where, we go and get lunch. This is where tea, coffee is. These are where the toilets are. They're really
Absolutely.
kind of explicit. You go, that's great, because they were the ones in my mind as hygiene factors were worrying me or niggling
Yeah,
me.
absolutely.
Whereas then you get the other kind of bits of people, you go and join, and then there's a book given to you, and you kind of got to learn this, and you just think, hang on a minute, it doesn't take to good etiquette to help or show, doesn't it? From that
I think
aspect.
just the little things, and as I said, that's a great example of things that help everybody, not just people who are neurodiverse.
Yeah.
I've had jobs where before I've started, I've gone for lunch with the team,
Yeah.
and that was great because that way I already knew them. So before I started at strategy, outside of the interview process, we have a lot of strategy days, which is where we kind of have a speaker, and I'd already met most of the team because I'd been to a strategy day and kind of chatted with most of them, so that when I started on my first day, it felt quite comfortable.
Yes.
It was kind of, oh, hi, Emily, hi, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Emily will love the fact that I've name checked her twice now.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that there's a commission there for Emily. I think she'll be writing to me saying, Steve, what commission rights do I get on this?
Oh dear. But yeah, it's just about the comfort factor. And I think people underestimate how hard it is to be new.
Yeah.
Speaking as somebody who's had a lot of interim jobs, I've been new probably more than most, and I've had some really good experiences, and I've certainly had some experiences where I've thought, okay,
Yeah. And it was even to share with you something. Yesterday, I was at a network meeting I was asked to go along to, and I was a bit reluctant. I thought, oh, that's not really my thing. But do you know what? I'm going to go. I've been asked to go along. And do you know what started off though was the email from the colleague before who was organising it, just to say, Steve, we really welcome you. And it was really personal. It wasn't a generic kind of just push a button email. And then they gave me a courtesy call the day before. Really looking forward to you getting in. Do you know how to get here? Do you know where to park, etc.? When I got there yesterday, straight away, there's a few people in the room. Straight over to me, hello, Steve. Really good. And it just makes you feel like, this is quite a nice place to be.
It feels okay. Somebody's taught, yeah. And I think, when we do events and strategy, we work really hard at kind of having somebody on the door. We make sure there's enough parking at the front of the offices, and when people come in, I think it's part of the experience is probably the word I'm going to use there.
Yes.
But I think it's really important that we kind of, I usually say, I'm Helen, I'm the one who's been annoying you and emailing you all the time, and just so it feels, that a friendly environment, and and then we've got all our lovely sofas that people can just curl up on, and there we go. It kind of feels like a good environment.
Yeah. But it also, I think, before we started today as well, we were talking about experience, and I think in the authentic leadership, in the learning environment, anything we do, the experience is absolutely wonderful. Because I read a really good article the other day about it's easier to be, from a human perspective, to be negative because of how our brains connect, and actually we can remember things negative, and we're quite happy to talk about it. That's why we dwell on negativity rather than positivity. So it is hard work to be positive, but if we can make people have a great experience, the positivity is going to grow from that aspect as well. So I just thought it for me tied in quite nicely about giving that great experience to people that will create the positivity.
I think so. And I think one of the things from a learning point of view that I hang my hat on is accelerated learning principles of David Meyer. And one of the ones that sits in there is positive emotions aid learning. And I think I come back to that again. And I know we're going slightly off topic, but if I could just share this story.
Yes, right,
I was once delivering a coaching workshop, and this doesn't sound positive to start off with, just to be clear. And I fainted only for about 2 minutes, not anything dramatic. And I'd got to the O in the grow model. That's really important. And I fainted, and the only reason that they knew I'd fainted because I'd stopped talking. That was the main thing that they'd realised. But the really interesting thing about that was we spent a lot of time kind of laughing about it afterwards, because I was okay. I'd still managed to keep my tea upright as well, which was quite interesting. But that was the workshop they always remembered. And if I said to any of that group, what's the grow model, they knew it.
Yeah.
Because that kind of, it was an anchor for them. They remember, oh, that's the one where you fainted, wasn't it? And that kind of brought it out. And And it was a positive experience. I also fell into a Christmas tree once, but that's a whole other story.
We'll have that on the next podcast, which is the version 2.0 coming up with Helen.
Yeah.
We'll have that one.
Nobody needs to hear that story more than once.
Yeah, that's for a separate channel. We'll have that one. So just you and I touched once before. We had a really good chat, and we were talking about being happier or happiness in the workplace. So a question I've got about there is like, how can leaders support colleagues to be happier, or is happiness good in the workplace? Or so it's probably I'll hand over to you, because we had a good debate around it, good chat. So I'll hand over to you on this about happiness.
That anybody who knows me at this point is going, oh, please don't ask about that.
Yeah.
So I think where's my position on this? I'm going to start by saying later on this year I'm doing a bit of a talk which is called "Is Happiness Overrated at Work?" And I don't think happiness is a bad thing. I really want to get that out there. But what I do think is a concern, I think, is the obsession with happiness and people being happy all the time. You know, if you think the UN measures it, I think Finland is the happiest place in the world right now. And I'm not so sure that people are happy all the time. You know, I live in Stoke, so obviously I'm going to talk about Robbie Williams just for a very short second. And in one of his songs, he talks about you have to get high before you taste the lows. And, you know, if you are happy all the time, doesn't that just become the norm? And therefore you're not happy? So that's my first kind of thing with it. You know, what is, and also, is happiness quite a fleeting emotion anyway? You know, I would say I get happy when Man United win. I get happy when I eat a bag of kettle crisps. You know, doesn't last that long, if I'm really honest.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not about happiness, it's about contentment.
Yeah.
And how can you build lasting contentment? And then my other thing around happiness is, I think we're really comfortable with people being happy at work because that's easy to deal with.
Yeah.
I think we're less comfortable with people being upset, angry, just a little bit different to the norm. You know, I could walk into any organisation tomorrow and say, do you know what? I could deliver you a session on how to have a difficult conversation, and they'd bite my hand off.
Yeah.
Because those are the ones we feel less comfortable with. But actually, people experience a whole range of emotions at work. And because I feel big on the shout outs today, I'm going to give a shout out to Phil Wilcox, who runs the Emotion at Work consultancy. And he has a great video, which is If I Should Have a Workplace. And it talks about being able to express that range of emotions at work and that being okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And sorry, go on, carry on. No.
I was just going to say, and that's my thing with happiness. I think, yes, absolutely. People who are happier at work are more engaged. They're more likely to demonstrate, I've forgotten the word now, but that extra effort, discretionary effort. There we go. And I get that. But then I also think people need to be themselves as well. And they need to bring, you know, we talk about now so often about bringing your whole self to work. Yeah. But doesn't happiness contradict that? Because if my whole self is not happy all the time. And that isn't my idea, by the way. I need to credit Mark Brackett, who talks about that. Yeah.
But it goes back to, though, I think on there, Helen, about contentment in the workplace, and even the work that we do. That people say, oh, we work in a really happy workplace, and that's not life. That's I've never come across, and adults disagree on everything every day. That's just called constructive conflict. That happens.
Yeah.
So, for example, it could be, Helen, and you know, I'm looking at your background and I go, well, that's a lovely shade of yellow in the background. You may go, well, actually, I think it's a mustard, Steve. We're in a disagreement. That's conflict, but that's just human nature. So I think the bit there we tried to get, and I remember many, many years ago in an organisation that we had, one of my leaders I worked for said, right, we need to have more happiness, we need to have more fun, so I'm going to allocate someone head of fun. And it was so contrived and painful that actually it made people less happy and kind of had a negative effect or contradictory effect to it. So I get where you come from more now around actually about contentment of work, about bringing the best person or version to themselves. And if people aren't happy, as in not bringing their best version of themselves or to work, or that's where we lean in and have those difficult conversations and talk to them and ask them what's going on in their lives, etc. One thing that I always say on the kind of the podcast, that leaders take the paycheck to be a leader. That's not just all for the good times.
It's for the bad times.
That's for you being a people leader, and the bad times, and really expressing and leaning into kind of colleagues. So I think for us, for the leaders out there, of yes, it's the good times, you take the paycheck, you get all that success, but actually majority of the time is about looking after and picking up those emotional kind of points with colleagues as well. So you can see that's my Braveheart speech then.
Yes,
I was on one then.
It's going to be a wobbly sword moment now.
Yeah, I was literally I was going to get my kilt out. I was really going for it then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to pick up, if I could, on enforced fun. I think if you've got to call it fun, it probably isn't.
Yes,
I think certainly. I always used to talk about. I've been talking to this about somebody this morning, actually. Team building. So sometimes when I was self-employed, particularly, people used to phone me up and say, "Oh, you do some team building?" And I said, "What do you want to get out of it?" And they'd say, "Oh, we want to have a nice time." And I say, "Well, go bowling, go for a meal. You don't need me for that." And I think there's that kind of, what was one person's fun is not another person's fun.
Yes.
And I think, to be a very open and honest example, I'm really bad in a social situation. I often describe myself as extroverted for pay, which I kind of nicked off Twitter. I think it's Adam Carpier who came up with it first. But in a social situation, I'm just not your person for that. And so I quite often, when the team goes out, I'm not that person who goes with him, but that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's not a thing, and I think that's really important. Because otherwise I often describe, there was a song in the, this is going to date me, probably 80s, I think. There was a song by Jonah Louie, which was, "You would always find me in the kitchen at parties."
Yeah.
I wouldn't actually be in the kitchen. I'd be under the table in the kitchen.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe myself.
Well, I remember going back in my career that because you replicate the people that have gone before you, and so I worked predominantly in the banking industry, and it was one of those ones of, right, we once a month we have a team meeting. People will go out for drinks, social. It will be that, and I remember quite often coming home late at night. It could be and with my wife or partner, and saying, "Did you enjoy it?" "Not really. I stayed because I felt as though I had to stay." And then I replicate it. So there's things that I've got wrong over in my career, totally say it. And then as later on, I thought I don't want to be out socialising. So towards my end of my career in the banking world, I thought I don't want to be that. But then it started to get frowned upon of, well, you're antisocial, you don't want to be part of the team and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, well, I do want to be part of the team, but I don't want to stay out drinking late at night. That's not for me. I've got other things in my life and things I want to do. So we just have to be respectful that everybody's got a different life outside and how people convert. And not to be funny, I like going to bed at 9 o'clock, so I can't stay out too late.
Me too, if I'm really on it. Me too, if I'm really on it. I mean, it's a bit of a stretch sometimes when we've stayed up till 9:30. But I think, when we talk about fun, let's think about a range of things we can do. It's not always about the drinking or the bowling, or my husband went on a team build, which is about throwing axes, which I think had a potential to lots of things to go wrong there. Let's think about a range of things we can do, and it's not always about the slides and the trampolines and the all that kind of thing. Let's think about the simple stuff. We carved pumpkins on Halloween last year at Strategy. I've never carved a pumpkin before, and I dressed up as a pumpkin. Now there's a sight.
There's a claim to fame. So we've got Avengers earlier on, and now Pumpkin Lady.
And now I've gone to Pumpkin Lady. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So if we move into last couple of questions that we have for today, because you and I, we know, can talk for ages. We know that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely that. So how would you describe the learning experience of Strategy Solutions? What would colleagues get from Strategy coming along and that kind of stuff?
We have an acronym that we use, which is reality. We talk about something called reality learning, and that all stands for things. So it's relevant, exciting, achievable, lived, interesting, transforming, and yields value. But the things that people should expect, and I sometimes use express and expect the unexpected, and I don't mean that in a scary way. It's a very safe environment. It's a very interactive environment. It's a very informal environment. I think people should expect to have an interactive discussion. They should expect to be doing a lot of things. They might expect a bit of pass the parcel, because I do love a spot of pass the parcel in learning development. It's one of my things. I think they should expect to come away with some really useful tools that they can put away. So we have a leadership academy, and one of the things we do with the leadership academy is at the end of every session we ask people, what are you going to take away, and then at the following session we ask people to talk about that.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to see how that has been applied and how they've used it, and how people start to bring things to the party. So in that session at the beginning of the learning, I often talk about what I've learned over the last month as well, and share some of that. So I think people should expect it to be informal. They should expect it to be very engaging, and they should come away with some real practical terms. And the yielding value is really important to me, because for me, the idea of L&D being pink and fluffy, that makes me quite cross.
Yeah.
Really honest. It should add value to their lives in some way.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, why have we done it?
Yeah. And I love that bit there, that when I work with people and that, it's not just about the course, it's about life skills. So it's not just I've learned this today for 7 hours or a week or whatever it is. I can only use that between 9 till 5 if I use stereotypical dates or times. I can no, you can use it in your whole of your life as a different change or that kind of thing. And that's why I think learning courses, etc., whatever you take from it, whether it's work or home, you're going to take something from it.
I think so. And I think, coaching is a great example of something which is a life skill. I think coaching is a conversational technique. You can use that anywhere, apart from with my husband, apparently, because I tried it once and he went, stop coaching me and stop painting. But apart from that, it'll probably work most places.
Yeah. I think we've all been there where we've learned stuff and then go back to our partners, or I go back to my wife and she says to me, Steve, what you're trying a new thing out on me. And I go, damn, you've caught me out again. So really, really good. So a lot of people ask, and I get people that say about self-development. So what are you working on for Helen for 2023? What's your personal development or goals, etc., for 2023?
So I think there are a couple of things that I'm interested in. My first goal is to make the L&D strategy the best it can be. And I think we're on a journey with that in terms of, how we develop that and move that forward. And I'm always kind of looking at things that can help me from a professional point of view. So I do go to a lot of things, and sometimes it's just the little things that make me think. I think the other thing that I'm working on quite a lot, I'm doing a lot more speaking outside of my day job, if you like, at strategy. So this being part of it almost as well. And the thing that's really interesting me at the moment is Gen Z.
Yeah.
And the reason Gen Z, because I seem to have had or been in a room a lot recently where there've been a lot of discussions about Gen Z and Gen Z not necessarily, and the way they approach things. And it feels to me that there's probably an ingrained stereotype going on there.
Yes.
There's a lot of chat about, being quite lazy, and I'm not sure that's true. And I think I almost want to debunk the myth. So I think that's probably a topic I'm going to go after this year and kind of explore a bit more, because I think it feels to me, and it's probably part of the inclusion debate for me, it feels to me that we're too quick to rush to those things.
Yes.
And actually, I'm not sure that's true. That's certainly not my experience of Gen Z. But people kind of hone in on that and just it's kind of trotted out a bit too easily for me.
Yeah, and it's labelled too quickly, and from that aspect as well. So some really good development there. And I also know that you're very curious and constantly learning and wanting to develop yourself, which is great. And I think that's a real good bit about you as a person, Helen, about constantly wanting to learn, get better, share your vision, share your stories with colleagues. And then I think that brings people in to want to work or come to your courses and because that's what they're going to get, is someone that's really passionate and wants to do well from that aspect. So hopefully I haven't made you go red or blush there.
Well, nobody will be able to see it anyway. It'll be fine.
Yeah, for that aspect. And then the last bit, which is not a question, but how can people connect with you, Helen, and how can they kind of get in touch with you, anything like that? How can they get hold of you?
Well, they can find me at Strategy. So it's Helen at strategysolutions.co.uk. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just be careful. There's a lot of Helen Baileys. I'm the one that's got a lot of posts usually. And it's Strategy with an I. That's the other thing I have to say. You can find me on Instagram now at Louise Bailey, but I'm still learning Instagram, so bear with me. And if you wanted to find me on Twitter, it's also Louise Bailey, but there's a lot of Man United stuff on there, so I'll just warn you about that in advance.
Yeah.
But I love people coming to talk to me. I love to have a chat, as you know, Stephen. I'm always up for a coffee and a chat, so please get in touch.
Yeah, really good. So I found it really great getting to know Helen more and more over the kind of months and weeks that we've got to know each other, which is great. And you get lots of good ideas from Helen, which is wonderful. So I just want to say a massive thank you today. I didn't want to bring any Seville oranges along from a Man United perspective. I didn't want to do that today to offend you in any way, shape or form. But I just want to say thank you so much for being a wonderful guest. And I know our paths will carry on from this book kind of day forward. I know that definitely. But Helen, it's been wonderful. And thank you so much for coming along today to Inspiring Thoughts podcast.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.